Good evening, afternoon, whenever you happen to be listening, and welcome to the Broadhurst-Watkins Sports Report,
Sports in black and white.
a presentation of the Not a Network podcast company, which, by the way, guess what? We're on YouTube! Woo!
I put out the big announcement on Twitter. We finally decided behind the scenes, all right, the shows will have a home. So, aside from point of viewer, because
Obvious reasons.
and the Nielsen ratings, all of our shows will be out on Twitter at Not a Network Pods, on Twitch, twitch.tv/AWP Podcast. Yes, we know we're going to change the name and everything. Twitch is weird like that. And if you search on YouTube for Not a Network Podcast, yes, YouTube is a different kind of weird, and we're fixing that too. The Nielsen rate. What?
On a related note, if you search for Broadhurst-Watkins Sports Report, you'll find us that way too.
Oh, of course. You search for us, will be there. The Nielsen ratings will be a Twitch/YouTube exclusive. Point of viewer will be a Twitter exclusive. So we'll still have all our bases covered.
Again, obvious reasons. Oh, who are we? I'm the Broadhurst part. I'm Harry Broadhurst. I'm the voice of reason. Allegedly. Joining me, as per usual, he is the Watkins part. He is the HNIC of the Not a Network podcast company. He is Eric Watkins.
And I'm actually going to be embodied for these episodes. If you listen to Parallel Convergence, A, thank you. B, get those hashtags trending. And C, you will already understand.
IYKYK? Seems legit. All right, so this is the football edition of BWSR. And as per usual here on the football edition of BWSR, we start how we always do. It's time. Cue the graphic for studs and duds.
Well, I'm trying to cue the graphic, but also looking up because, again, I picked my stud a while back.
Yeah, I did the same, and I need to look up his stats as well. So if you're ready to go first, by all means do so. I'm going to need a second to pull up his stat line because I know it's super impressive.
Well, we here at the Broadhurst-Watkins Sports Report love ourselves a good scoregami.
Sports in black and white.
Oh, I didn't think that you were going to do it this time since we passed the open of the show.
You did it at the open. I always hit your first one as well. Continue.
Fair enough. But we here love ourselves a good scoregami.
At Scorigami on Twitter, SCORIGAMI.
I thought it was at NFL_scoregami.
Did they have to put the NFL in front of it?
Yeah, NFL_scoregami. But yes.
Well, if you search for Scorigami on Twitter, you'll find it.
Yeah, and if you'll search it, you'll get some interesting threads. Thanks to as you described it, Harry, the Thursday night fuck this.
If you watched yesterday's TNF game, almost 5 quarters of it like I did, you understand what I meant by that.
And as John Morgan would say, if you sat through that entire game, you may be entitled to financial compensation. But
call J.G. Wentworth.
877 cash now. Bum bum. But from a game that was the first ever with both quarterbacks having at least 4 Pro Bowl selections to not feature a single touchdown. Yes, even it was that bad, but it still deserves a squid bit. My stud goes to what is the highest scoregami ever. And a game that would make even Antonio Brown jealous. More on that later. Seattle Seahawks 48, Detroit Lions 45. Who knew Geno Smith could actually be a competent quarterback? I would never have thought.
Okay, is it that Geno is competent or is it that the Detroit defense is incompetent? Because I'm going to lean more to the side of the latter there.
Okay, for this one, yes. But if you take away this game and the game against Denver, because, well, Denver, he's not terrible.
I don't know that
Man, he's
not.
not terrible.
I don't know that not terrible is a compliment. However, it might be the most backhanded compliment we've ever given here on the Broadhurst-Watkins Sports Report.
But I mean, if you think about it, though, considering his stops in New York for both teams,
Um, as we've said many times on this show before, where's IKN and Paulie when you need them?
I rest my case. So for that one, I mean, keep biting at the kneecaps, Detroit. You're still going places, but that one was a little bit of a heartbreaker. I feel bad for you.
Lions have New England, I believe, on Sunday, which should be a very interesting contest.
Oh, I may or may not have Aiden Hutchinson as one of my IDP fantasy teams, and when you're going up against a guy named Bailey Zappi,
I'm glad that I'm glad that I watched NFL Primetime this past week because I'd have had no clue how to pronounce that last name. All right. So we talk about the rise and fall a lot here on the Broadhurst-Watkins Sports Report. We talk about players that are maybe their better days are behind them, and players who, well, son of a bitch. I'm going to make a bold prediction right now, Mr. Watkins.
oh,
Your 2022 NFL Comeback Player of the Year is Saquon Barkley.
I don't see it as that bold of a prediction given how he's really been the motor of the Giants' offense.
The 3-1 Giants.
Feels weird hearing that out loud.
There is fuckery afoot up in what used to be the Meadowlands. 31 carries, 146 yards. After a week one tally of 164 yards, and then over 70 yards in both of his other two games. Eric, Saquon Barkley is the NFL rushing leader after 4 weeks into the season.
Again, when he's healthy, you ain't relying on Daniel Jones. Now, we got to give some potential credit because even though things have been going kind of squirrely in the UK, you will have to account for exchange rates after next week.
Giants in Jacksonville, yes.
Giants in Green Bay.
Which one's the Jacksonville game?
Oh, that's later in the season?
I know you guys have one over there this year.
We do, but it's not this early, and we're not getting our bye week afterwards, which, well,
So, as I was saying, I would like to toss out an early nomination for Saquon Barkley as your NFL Comeback Player of the Year because so far, I can tell you this right now. Without Saquon Barkley, there's no chance the Giants are 3-1.
I mean, didn't you describe them as, well, now that they're 3-1, like the most 0-4 kind of 3-1 team out there?
20-12 over Chicago in the aforementioned game that I just talked about. The loss coming to Dallas the week prior, 23-20, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then the wins over Tennessee and Carolina. To be fair, Tennessee and Carolina combined have won one game. So, grain of salt.
Well,
but
yeah, at that point, I think, because hasn't Tennessee actually finally won one themselves? Because the Texans are now the only winless team in the league.
Right, 3-1. After the Raiders beat Denver. And seriously, honorary dud to the NFL. Can we stop putting the Broncos in fucking prime time? Jesus H.
They can come back in prime time when Nathaniel Hackett is summarily fired. We're fine with that. But as long as he's calling plays, Broncos country, let's ride out of town.
Can I also offer an honorary stud as well to Shady McCoy for absolutely lighting up RG3 on Twitter? Because those screenshots that I sent you, that shit had me dying.
That was pure gold.
All right, so that's my stud for the week with Saquon Barkley and an honorary stud to Shady McCoy for lighting up RG3. Eric, times are troubling in Oklahoma these days.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley took his bandwagon and went out to USC land. Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams moved on respectively as well.
Rattler to South Carolina, which things aren't going too well. Caleb Williams balling out at USC.
So there's a game this week, and we'll talk more about it later.
Mm-hmm.
The Red River rivalry, which is really early in the season, and I think that's kind of the Big 12's fuck you to Oklahoma and Texas for leaving.
Oh, yeah. Usually this is like definitely,
this game's usually right around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, because that's around the time when the Texas State Fair comes to town, and they have it right around the State Fair.
Because I know the Oklahoma game for the Thanksgiving game for Oklahoma is Bedlam. I would assume it's Texas Tech. It would make sense, but
yeah.
The point being, going back to Oklahoma here, so Lincoln Riley dipped. He went out to USC, who is 5-0 now. Caleb Williams followed him to USC. Spencer Rattler decided that the current Oklahoma regime was not for him and is having his own issues down at South Carolina with Shane Beamer. What's left of the Oklahoma Sooners have done something that the Oklahoma Sooners have not done in, I believe, more than a decade. Lose 2 straight games in the Big 12.
Sooner ain't booming.
K-State beat them in a close game. And I'm going to point out to you, if you recall, that one of us picked Kansas State to be in the Big 12 title game this year.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that same person also picked Oklahoma, so what does he know? So the following week, after losing to K-State, Oklahoma plays TCU, a program they have traditionally dominated. 55-31. And 31 only because Oklahoma scored late. The Sooners got decimated by the Horned Frogs. Times are troubling in Norman these days.
I mean, with the fact that they're on the verge of leaving, the fact that the SEC is going to be scrapping divisions, all kinds of other stuff potentially going on. You got a lot of questions, and I really think very, very few answers.
I take that back, by the way. It was 55-24.
Oh, that makes it worse.
Well, I mean, in fairness, it was 41-17 at halftime.
Yeah, so you only went ahead and let them stop at hanging half 100 on you.
Speaking of which, who was it? Stephen F. Austin, 98 points. Did you see that shit?
I did. I was kind of hoping they would have the first 100-point college football performance in over a century, but what can you do?
It is kind of ironic that we are discussing that today. Squidbit gimmick infringement. Technically speaking, we were scheduled to record this on the 6th. However, it was postponed to Friday the 7th. By the time we actually get around to recording it, it is now October 8th, peek behind the curtain. But October 7th is actually the anniversary of the largest scoring blowout in college football history.
The
October October 7th, 1917. Go ahead.
the big fuck you with John Q. Heisman and the Georgia Tech 222-0 win?
Against Cumberland. Today was the 95th anniversary?
105th.
105th. Yeah, wow, my math. I'm glad you're here to do the math for me.
Like a certain someone on another show says, they like their math done for them. Speaking of, someone was getting a Hank Hill coaching speech special after that game. Funnily enough, the only reason that game was even played was Coach Heisman was so much of a dick. He's like, I don't care if you disbanded your football team. You either play or you pay me $2,000.
Which you have to remember, this is $2,000 in 1917 money.
So Cumberland was like, okay, we'll scrap together 11 guys. We'll go ahead and we'll have at it because we ain't that kind of, ain't got that kind of cash just laying around.
60.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say 66 or 63, 63, 54, 44.
And the only reason the fourth quarter was only 44 points was Heisman's one showing of mercy by shortening the game by 5 minutes.
We hereby dub that game the Jim Cornette special here at BWSR. Thank you. Fuck you. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So, yeah, my dud is that times are troubled in Norman, Oklahoma these days. Eric, what you got for your dud?
Change the graphic.
The National Football League and the National Football League Players Association,
Boo.
they haven't agreed on much the past, decade and a half.
Ever.
Being nice. This is the one thing that you got them to agree on. I assume a fair amount of our listening and viewing audience saw both the Bills game against the Dolphins, complete with #buttpunt, as well as their following game, the Dolphins against the Bengals on Thursday night.
The Thursday night game that didn't suck last week.
Exactly. Yeah. To be very nice and understated, didn't fare too well. For what actually happened, in one game, he stumbled off the field and was taken to the locker room, went through concussion protocol, and then came up.
And then came back with a back injury.
Yeah. So he went ahead, finished that game, and it was a very, very well, you would say, tablet throwing win if you were one Ken Dorsey. Then Thursday happened. A mostly routine, pretty clean hit in the second quarter. Tua didn't fare so well. And by not fare so well, I mean he laid on the ground at Paul Brown Stadium for 12 minutes.
Didn't he have a mini seizure?
I don't think they classified it as a mini seizure, but with the electrical signals all going on in his brain, what he did was called posturing, to where everything is so overloaded, you have your unusual hand and arm movements That's why he was making those gestures. Needless to say, he is in proper concussion protocol with no timetable for return. And the doctor who initially cleared him through the original protocol was summarily fired, rightfully so.
The unaffiliated neurological consultant, the UNC. And the only reason I know those words is because of the fact that I read the article about him getting fired on ESPN.com.
For what they described as multiple mistakes in his evaluation.
I believe the proper term would be gross negligence. Speaking of which, proper terms and lawsuits and stuff, I sense a segue.
There is. And the reason why, because you think, oh, proper terms, lawsuits. Why did I mention the NFL and the Players Association? I'm glad you asked. For the Players Association in particular, when they go through the process of concussion protocol and has mentioned it in the collective bargaining agreement, they harped on 3 words to be clarified and included. Gross motor instability. When you display what Tua displayed against Buffalo, you're done. You're out. You're getting checked properly.
Basically, what he's referring to is the hit in the Bills game, and when Tua stood up, both of his legs decided that they didn't want to work.
Exactly. So the NFLPA quickly, almost immediately, pushed to have that clause mentioned in the concussion protocols, and that's been approved. They are waiting on the NFL to officially do so, and they wanted to do it right then and there to be in effect immediately to protect players, even in what was the field goal fest for the ages Thursday night. Considering how some of the hits in that one, I can see where their heads were at.
No, the people that got hit on the game on Thursday night were the fans who decided to watch that entire snore fest.
Well, I mean, they didn't even watch all of it. I saw the exodus out of Empower Field before overtime. Like I said, hey, here's some free football that nobody wants. Enjoy.
The other joke that I had lined up there, it was a field goal game for the ages. Yes, ages 60 and up, so they could take a power nap. So speaking of lawsuits, Mr. Watkins, I feel it only appropriate to segue over to So That Happened and talk about a lawsuit. Time to tiptoe. Okay, so you remember those jackasses from Nathan's hot dog eating contest earlier this year?
They're back!
And apparently, one of them decided that it would be a good idea to invade the field on Monday Night Football. Bobby Wagner had other ideas about that happening.
Thank you, Bobby Wagner. That's all we're going to say.
Oh, no, we're going to say a little bit more about it. The first thing we're going to say is Bobby Wagner lit this dude the fuck up. And it was awesome.
And he's like, look, I'm losing. Y'all doing this. I'm done. You're out. Bye.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, and then he was like, all right, I've done my job. Security, you take it from there.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Game was in Los Angeles, I believe. Or was it at Century Field?
No, I think it was at Levi's Stadium in San Francisco.
San Fran, sorry, not Los Angeles. Seahawks at Niners.
Oh, it was Rams at Niners.
Oh, that's right. Wagner's a Ram now. I got hit in the head by that Thursday night game. Anyways, try this again. So I forgot Wagner's a Ram now because the article that I was reading talked about his past with the Seahawks.
Right.
Okay, I do apologize for that. The point being there is so the game was at Levi Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if these people are aware of this or not. There's actually print on your tickets that state that if you enter the field of play, that the organization is not liable for what happens to you. Your lawsuit literally does not have a leg to stand on.
I am saying nothing. Because believe me, I don't want to get any death glares from standards and practices. We've talked about this.
No, all I'm saying is Wagner was well within his rights to light this dude up.
And all I'm saying is, as I see an off-screen death glare, again, as a former, and there were talks about, returning co-hosts would say, you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. As I am no longer being death glared, I think that's okay.
Grown-ass decisions have grown-ass consequences. Next time, hit them harder, Bobby.
Standards and practices from the Not a Network does not condone or express any of the opinions stated on this current podcast. You will now be changing the topic. Thank you.
What we have issues against people running onto fields like dumbasses?
Specifically this set of dumbasses, because again,
we're not giving them any kind of publicity here, though. We're more talking about the fact that Wagner should have hit him harder. All right. I can tell I'm probably about 3 seconds away from getting kicked off this show. So let's go ahead and go over to Eric's So That Happened NFL
you were
edition.
3 seconds away from me forcibly ending your broadcast, yes.
So,
things like this didn't happen at W2M.
W2M wasn't being backed by a Florida nonprofit corporation.
Carry on, Eric.
So, I mentioned into...
Hold on, here. Allow me to set you up since we don't have the clip here. Guys, there's another Antonio Brown thing.
Oh, yes. And I may or may not have requested that clip to be added in the future by a certain producer, because something like this is going to happen again. I kind of teased in the episode title about Alphabet Week for football. We mentioned the horrendous OT decided on an FG with no TDs, and the bigger story is seeing AB's D. I swear that never gets old. So, the man formerly known as Mr. Big Chest, he's been active lately, shall we say. Be it both on Instagram, trolling the situation with Tom Brady, having a picture of himself in his Bucs uniform with Gisele Bündchen. And also on a bit of a vacation in Dubai, in a pool, with witnesses nearby. Now there's been more footage that has come out. You know how you playfully sometimes kind of splash in the pool with your friends or you're flirting a little bit? You normally do that with your hands and stuff, right?
Oh, geez, Louise. Are you freaking kidding me?
Not quite that extent, but you know how we say about levels of decorum between doing that and, obeying public decency laws by wearing trunks or something in a public pool? Antonio Brown believes in neither of those things. In a lead up to a certain incident, there's been footage that's come out where he showed one friendly person in the pool the dark side of the moon, as I'll call it. Up
The entrance,
close and personal.
the entrance to the Hershey Highway.
I mean, when the song says dancing cheek to cheek, it's not how that means.
All right, you got me with that one.
Normally, I wouldn't do this to myself, but... And in the words of Ron Popeil, but wait, there's more. He decides, you know what, that wasn't enough. I'm going to go hang back, put my arms on the edge of the pool, everything's fine. Oh, look, there's this friendly, somewhat older couple nearby. Oh, look at what I have here. Look at what I can do. And promptly gives the full Monty.
Did he go Lonely Island?
Minus the box.
I mean the helicopter.
Oh, no.
Why do I feel this news story would have been more appropriate for point of viewer?
I mean, you're not the first one to really mention that. Yeah. All I'm going to say in that regard is I shouldn't have seen certain things, but having seen certain things, damn it, I'm impressed.
We here at the Not a Network Podcast Company do not encourage anyone to go look for said footage of said things that Mr. Watkins saw. However, if you're interested, apparently Dennis Rodman shows his on a somewhat consistent basis on the new season of The Surreal Life.
Well, I mean, that's the same man who had mentioned in a video 3 different stories about the penile fractures, so that's kind of the norm for him.
To be fair, that dude was tapping mid-90s Carmen Electra. He was doing something right.
Oh, he was doing a lot right. If you go and find that video where he explains every incident with some interesting details, you will also be impressed. Now,
all right, I think I'm about at my limit of penile conversations on this episode.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of tweets that came out for that incident, tying back to my stud and RG3 trying to step up his Twitter game. He said himself, you know, Antonio Brown showed more D than either of those teams on Sunday. And finally, you think that's bad? The guest of honor himself tweeted out. You know how he said he was going to, and I quote, put that shit on and he was ready for it? He said himself, and I quote verbatim from his Twitter, I'm telling every team that needs a wide receiver to go ahead and call AB, because I've shown I've still got the ability to expose a D. Now I'm done. On a semi-related note, anybody hear from Vontaze Burfict in the past couple of years? He's been awfully quiet. I wonder why.
Eric, I think at a time like this, there's only really one thing for me to say. Don't be a dick. Or maybe we should change that to don't be an Antonio Brown? We'll take that under consideration. All right, let's move over to our...
I was going to say something in reference to a song title, but I probably shouldn't.
Oh, we're about to get fired. And I mean both of us. Mostly because of you.
Standards and practices went ahead and left. All I was going to say is there is a song from back in the 70s that happens to be called Big 10 Inch. It is a very good song. I have heard it. It's worth a listen.
See, here, I thought you were about to drop a My Ding-a-Ling reference. And I just popped Eric on air.
Hi! I can explain, you see?
No, we can't. We're moving on.
I thought you'd laugh.
Hey, Eric, guess what?
What?
Wisconsin's head coaching career came to a very flaccid finish.
I did leave. I'm watching on Twitch.
I feel like we're still
I
within
have
the
standards and practices. I do have the capability to just leave and still watch your show. I don't have to be in your studio to be doing my job. In fact, if I'm not in your studio, that should be me doing a good job.
I mean,
Why
technically,
won't you let me do a good job?
technically, I'd like to think we're doing a good job. I don't control the news stories, now do I?
Not as good of a job as Antonio is, apparently. I broke both of them with that one. All right, moving forward.
Where's the fucking button on this one? Here we go.
All right, moving forward. As I said, Paul Chryst's career as the Wisconsin head coach has come to a very flaccid finish. As the Badgers have decided to make a change at the helm, becoming the 5th team already to fire their coach this year. At least 4th.
So, Edwards, yeah, I want to say 4 because there was another coach who actually just quit. The Wofford University Terriers. 1-11 last year, 1-5 this year. Their coach is like, fine, I'm out.
Major college football programs, I think, actually is the 4th, though.
Yeah.
Nebraska, Colorado, Georgia. No, 5th. Nebraska, Colorado, Georgia Tech, Arizona State, and now Wisconsin.
Yeah, and a couple of more potentially to be added to that list as well, the way the season's going.
Here's the obvious question. We talked about Nebraska and the rumors of Urban Meyer.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that Wisconsin's a much better opening than Nebraska is.
Not to mention those rumors about Urban Meyer, while they wish that they would go away, they have, because there's been some more rumors that have been more solidified. Does the name Bill O'Brien ring a bell?
The former Penn State coach who failed miserably in Houston.
Former Penn State coach, Houston Texans coach, and now Alabama offensive coordinator.
Well, to be fair, he is better suited as a collegiate head coach than he is as than he was as an NFL coach. I mean, his run at Penn State was actually quite solid until he got the job with the Texans, and then I believe it was when O'Brien left that James Franklin took over at Happy Valley.
Correct. So, go ahead.
Penn State with James Franklin still in charge now, 5-0 on the season.
And Alabama complaining about what else? A lack of offense.
Oh, I've watched Alabama this year. It's quite offensive.
Yeah. So needless to say, those in Tuscaloosa will be like, go ahead, take him off of our hands. He'll be your problem.
The point that I was making, however, going back to the Wisconsin-Nebraska thing there, is I would argue that Wisconsin's probably the more attractive job opening than Nebraska is, because while Nebraska has been struggling to get a foothold in the Big Ten, Wisconsin's an established Big Ten West powerhouse. Now, granted, we've talked about this before earlier this season. The balance of power in the Big Ten clearly lies in the East now with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State.
Mhm.
But you could argue that the right hire for Wisconsin could power them to a series of Big Ten West titles and conference championship game appearances.
And honestly, if there were ever going to be those rumors of Urban Meyer going anywhere, it could be right in Madison. You never know.
All right, so that's my collegiate so that happened, the end of the Paul Chryst era in Wisconsin. What's your collegiate so that happened, Eric?
You know I'm an ACC guy.
You are, especially as a Hurricanes fan. Note the jersey.
You know the times have been very, very peculiar when it comes to conference realignment. Well, apparently there's been some phone calls and some text messages and a few denials after that. There's been some movement behind the scenes of a talk about the ACC flat out merging with another conference, either the remainder of the Pac-12 or the Big 12. Given the media landscape and everything else, the reason why I bring this up now and I'm saving the Mike Leach story for next week is I think if this domino falls within the next couple of years, maybe the Mike Leach ideas start to swirl a bit heavier.
See, I would think we're missing the obvious choice for conference for the ACC to merge with. Wouldn't the obvious choice be the American?
I mean, yes, but at the same time, look at the state of the American.
Granted,
especially since you have their top schools that are going to be moving to the Big 12.
Cincinnati and UCF specifically.
Right. And to a lesser extent, Houston.
Well, I mean, Houston's over the last couple of seasons been kind of hit and miss. We talked about them earlier this year when Texas Tech knocked them out of the top 25.
Right.
But specifically Houston, who was a college football playoff participant last season.
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. And then Central Florida, who had back-to-back campaigns of undefeated regular seasons, one ending in a bowl victory, one ending in a bowl loss.
Mm-hmm.
The victory over Auburn, the loss to LSU, if memory serves.
Mm-hmm. So you would wonder, if they stayed in the American, the ACC would be quick to absorb them. But with the fact that you have got the Power 5 shrinking, you want to stick to being one of those power conferences. If anything, I would see more of the Big 12 rather than the Pac-12.
The Big 12, the Big 12 makes more geographical sense, and especially since the aforementioned American athletic schools are going to the Big 12.
Right. So you would still get coverage in. Well, it would still only be 2 time zones.
No, 3. BYU is in the mountain.
Yep. BYU moving over to the Big 12. So you would have a 3 time zone footprint, which would be great. Whereas with the Pac-12, yes, you could potentially have the 4, but you don't want to be put too thin.
My question is going to be is how much longer are these group of 5 schools, these group of 5 powerhouse schools, going to remain where they're at too? Like we just saw BYU leaving the Mountain West, and then Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida leaving the American Athletic. How long until schools like Appalachian State and James Madison, who has apparently handled the transition to FBS football just fine, thank you very much. How long until we see those schools knocking on the door of the Power 5 conferences as well?
Well, I mean, honestly, that depends. Is the Power 5 really going to stay the Power 5, or are we talking some sort of European Super League breakaway competition? Because that's already being talked about, among other things.
I did hear about the 2 different national championship divisions for the FBS breakoff. having an actual FBS affiliated with the NCAA, which would be the old Group of Five schools, and then having a breakaway from the NCAA from what was the Power Five, or the schools that would be associated with the Power Five, i.e. your ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, Notre Dame's.
Right. So I think if they go ahead and they operate more on that structure, FBS schools as they are now, your Group of Five, will be just fine.
You know what I want? I want relegation in college football.
I mean, if you have the situation, and we'll talk about this next week with what Mike Leach wants, I think in some ways that could be at least either doable or you can get a framework within a decade.
For example, the team that finishes last in all of the major conferences has to play the team that wins all of the major conferences in the Group of Five. And if the Group of Five school wins, they get promoted to the division, to the conference that they defeated. Like, for example, are you telling me that you don't think Appalachian State wouldn't beat the brakes off of Rutgers?
Easily.
So it would be a situation where we would see the elevation of the second-tier collegiate programs up to that top tier and the ability to see them take on higher quality competition.
The only issue, playing devil's advocate from that perspective, is scheduling. I'm fine with not having games mapped out through the middle of the 2030s, but I do think some schools would. If you're comfortable scrapping that, but having that maybe just only a season or so in advance, hey, you have your conference games locked in, go ahead and set up your non-conference games, all systems go.
Makes sense. All right. So I believe that wraps up So That Happened.
Yep. I am going to have to step away momentarily before the start of our next segment. So I will need you to take the reins for just a minute or two.
Because this went so well the last time, but okay. Sorry about that, folks. So we were talking, and due to the fact that we missed last week's episode, our apologies for that, by the way, a combination of me being out of town. I met up with my girlfriend last Thursday night, which is when we traditionally record, and Hurricane Ian threatening the East Coast. Coverage available in the Not a Network podcast archives over on Twitter, and coming soon, I think, to YouTube, the archived footage. We didn't do a show last week, and thus we have made the decision, myself and Mr. Watkins, to scrap the current I'm a Survivor runs. So even though I would have been on a 2-match winning streak, having taken Philadelphia over Washington and Buffalo over Baltimore, which the Bills were lucky to survive that game. We'll talk more about that here when we get to pour one out for the homers. We are instead going to go back to all 32 teams are eligible. And so I like the progress that I've seen in Cleveland. I do. I appreciate the progress that I've seen in Cleveland. The Browns are 2-2 this season. Realistically, the Browns should be 3-1 this season. The Jets game should have been a win. We can talk about the Nick Chubb not going out of bounds thing again here, but we talked about that ad nauseum when it happened. And the Browns have a win over their biggest division rival as well. They won in week 1. So, realistically speaking, the Browns franchise is on a high note, even though it's a 2-2 record after 4 games. A victory over the rival Steelers. Victory to end the longest opening week losing streak in National Football League history. I don't think that this team is consistent enough for me to have any kind of faith in them taking on a franchise like the Chargers with the 1-2 punch of Justin Herbert and Mike Williams.
So, Realistically, because I know Browns fans, especially with the Deshaun Watson suspension, are going to be very happy with 2-2. Put yourself in their shoes. Week 18, down to the wire. They have a chance to sneak in as the 7 seed in the AFC, hypothetically.
I think it's going to take 10 wins to get there, but yeah, it's possible.
Do you think fans would be happy with that given how last year was? If I'm a Browns fan, I would be through everything that's happened since then.
The turmoil that the team underwent in the offseason with the acquisition of Deshaun Watson and then the following court case that came with him, I would argue that Browns fans would be sufficiently happy with a postseason appearance this year. If Deshaun is able to get his shit together in the offseason and actually come back and play a full season next year, being the 7 seed overall in the AFC will not be enough for Cleveland fans to have put up with what they put up waiting for Deshaun to play and then just still being the same run-of-the-mill franchise they were under Baker Mayfield. So my I'm a Survivor pick for this week is going to be the Los Angeles Chargers over the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland on Sunday.
Let me go ahead and add that to the sheet. And also standards and practices, because I know you're watching, don't forget to go ahead and make your picks as well. So you're a Survivor. All right. Now for me, I am actually going to go ahead as I picked them, and I mentioned this earlier. Low-hanging fruit didn't necessarily work for me before. This one isn't entirely the low-hanging fruit that it appears, but you can still kind of reach up and grab it. I mentioned that in London, the Packers were going to take on the Giants. I'm more than comfortable with Saquon having another big day. I think Green Bay, at times, their defense can be a little bit suspect. Will he have a monster day, 130, 140 yards? I don't think it'll be that far. But teetering on the precipice of 100, that's fine. I still don't like what I see in Daniel Jones. And I think we can safely say that the Giants are sitting at 3-1 in spite of him and not always because of him.
I think they're sitting at 3-1 because of Brian Daboll and Saquon Barkley.
And the fact that now you've got Tyrod Taylor coming in and making appearances, you know how he is when he, isn't undergoing any sort of freakish injuries. When he's on, he will lead you to the playoffs.
Speaking of which, and speaking of lawsuits, Taylor actually sued the Chargers organization. Didn't know if you had heard that or not.
I didn't.
He sued the Chargers and the doctor specifically.
Honestly, I hope he wins. I'm going to be rooting for him.
I mean, I would argue it worked out to the Chargers' benefit because it gave Justin Herbert the field early, and Herbert has proven to be a competent, capable starter. But you couldn't help but feel bad because Taylor actually had some real strong talent around him out in Los Angeles with the Chargers and wasn't able to take advantage of it because of a medical mishap. Back to your prediction for the Giants and the Packers.
And because of all this, again, Aaron Rodgers is known to be good on 2 continents. And
just not in week 1.
Exactly, not in week 1. Thankfully, this isn't in week 1, and this also is in Florida, so it's a bigger thing for him. So with that, my Survivor pick, Tom Grossi's going to love me for this. Go Pack Go. It could be an interesting game, as we saw last week with Minnesota and New Orleans. But I picked Kirk Cousins and the Vikings to prevail on that one. I'm staying in the NFC North, and I'm picking Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay to prevail this week.
Mentioning Saquon, going back to him real quick, I mentioned that he was the NFL rushing leader after four games. 463 yards, so just a shade over 115 a game. Do you think he gets to a season average against Green Bay?
He will come up just short.
And just as importantly, if he does get to his season average, does that alter your opinion as far as potential for the Giants to win this game? Like, let's say Saquon does have one of those games that you talked about, that 130, 140-yard game. Because if there's just real quick, if there's one thing that we've seen on these London games here, it's that the stadiums themselves, while very visually impressive, they turn to shit quick.
And especially because I'm trying to remember which stadium they're playing at this week.
Was it Tottenham?
If it's a Tottenham Hotspur stadium, that's a huge factor because we're already into the thick of the Premier League season. So that's something to keep an eye out on.
I will look into that real quick.
Okay.
And while I do so, I will allow you to continue your point.
Yeah, to answer your question, if he does have one of those monster games, I think that's going to put the Packers, especially offensively, on just a little bit more of a back foot. And that would also allow Kayvon Thibodeau to shine. Because if he gets involved on top of that, the Giants can easily win, irregard to what Daniel Jones does. Jones does give them a lot more of a possibility.
Jones might not start. It might be Tyrod Taylor getting the start. I just saw that on USA Today.
Now, if Taylor, go ahead. And then
the game is at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. C, nationally televised broadcast. I believe the game is on Fox.
Really?
I think.
Because I know usually with the London games, they air them on NFL Network.
CBS actually had the game last week.
Oh, so it was a dual simulcast.
Right. Because
Okay.
I think each of the major networks gets one of the London games as well.
Yeah, so they had a dual simulcast along with NFL Network because they always carry the London games as well. Now, if Tyrod Taylor does confirm and get the start, and it's a monster day, the Giants can win going away. I have a lot more faith in that man seeing what he's done throughout his career.
I mean, you'll never hear me say a bad word about Tyrod Taylor. He's the man who ended the drought up in Buffalo. So
exactly. And had he started in the place of a certain Intercepticon, I wouldn't have one of my finer moments as a Jaguars fan. That's a compliment! You know it!
All right, let's move on. Eric, I do believe it's time to pour one out for the homers. So the Hurricanes didn't play.
Thankfully.
You guys returned to action this week against
North Carolina.
Oh, the team that I picked to win the Coastal Division this year.
Yep.
Well, if there's one thing that we can say for sure, nobody's going to play defense.
Well, My question
expectation. Oh, go ahead.
My question is, how the hell are we going to play offense?
More injuries?
Might have to rely on that one way or another.
I heard something about issues with Tyler Van Dyke. Can you update that on for me?
Oh, yeah. He had a terrible start. To quote the sign, Hurricanes very rarely do what they're supposed to do. Sometimes they veer left, sometimes they veer right, sometimes they go straight, and even sometimes they lose at home to Middle Tennessee State, a team which we've never beaten. Tyler Van Dyke had a horrible, one part heart attack and one part kernel failure, one part questioning my life. Tyler Van Dyke had a putrid performance at Hard Rock against the Blue Raiders, to the point to where he was benched. I mean, naturally, you throw a terrible pass and a pick six all in the first quarter, and you're down 10-17 to nothing early on in the game. You would expect that. He was benched in that game. However, Cristobal has come out and said that we're sticking with him, at least for the time being. But there are expectations with the fact that with Van Dyke is in more of a pro-style offense, and with Cristobal running much more high-tempo kind of a spread, it's not really the best fit. So expect TVD to enter the transfer portal after this season. In some ways, I feel bad, but I kind of get it if that turns out to be the case.
Not the simulcast this week. NFL Network only for Giants and Packers.
Okay, I figured.
All right, back to the Miami situation here. Yeah, I saw the score of the Middle Tennessee State game, and I was absolutely flabbergasted.
And the game was actually worse than that.
Yeah, I know you guys scored twice late in order to make it closer than it was, because final was 45-31, correct?
Correct.
And at one point, I think Middle Tennessee State was up like 30.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't talk. Granted, both of the Gators' losses, the Gators are coming off of a thorough domination of Randy's Eastern Washington team, 52-17 in the game, rescheduled a day because of Hurricane Ian. Did what we were supposed to do, took out an FCS program, a very good FCS program, national runners-up last year to FCS powerhouse North Dakota State, whom the Youngstown State Penguins lost to on Saturday. 21-7, North Dakota State.
Yeah, North Dakota State at it yet again. No surprise there.
But to what I was saying about Florida there, so we took care of business like we were supposed to against Eastern Washington. But the one game that we didn't get to talk about is what happened against Rocky Top, as Tennessee took out Florida 38-33 in a game that honestly wasn't that close either. The only reason we got within a score and a chance to tie it up late is because of a defensive lapse by Tennessee in the fourth quarter that allowed us to score the touchdown that brought it to a 5-point deficit. We won for 2 and didn't get it, and then tried an onside kick, and unfortunately the kick ended up going out of bounds, and thus Tennessee was able to walk away with the win.
But I am going to give you guys some credit. Look at what Tennessee did to Pittsburgh just prior to that. Plus, you were on the road in the SEC, yes, against a team you normally dominate, but they're top 10 for a reason. So I'm not giving your Gators too much flack for that. So you have a fairly big leg to stand on. I mean, it's a little bit iffy when you combine that with what happened with Kentucky, but that just shows that behind Georgia, there's a lot more parity in the SEC East.
Well, I would say that too, and the reason I would say that is the Gators are 3-2 right now, which is, I mean, we find ourselves in the same boat as like Oklahoma, who we talked about earlier in the show. But the difference is our 2 losses are to the number 8 and 13 ranked teams in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And when we lost to Kentucky, Kentucky was a top 10 team. When we lost to Tennessee, Tennessee was like 11th, and then they moved into the top 10 when they beat us. So it's not like our losses are embarrassing. It's just a case of there's like 2 really great programs in the SEC right now, Alabama and Georgia. And then there's like 5 or 6 different, maybe even closer to like 6, maybe 7 or 8 different programs that are like right at that next tier in the SEC. Your Kentuckies, your Tennessees, your LSUs when they're playing correctly, your A&Ms when they don't have their heads up their ass.
Ole Miss.
Mississippi State is currently ranked.
I mean, Arkansas was a top 10 team for a while. So again, when they play.
So my point being is that, like, obviously there is the creme de la creme of the SEC in Alabama and Georgia right now, and that goes without saying. They're the 1 and 2 ranked teams in the country. But any one of the rest of the tier, that second tier in the SEC, could play each other and have the result be a different result any week that they would play.
Absolutely. And when the SEC decides to scrap divisions in the next couple of years, if the teams can stay on this trajectory, there's going to be some delicious chaos. I will be here for it.
Penn State doesn't play this week. Penn State is currently 5-0. We are getting ready for a trip to the Big House, and we'll talk about that game next week. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, the 8 o'clock national on October 15th, or the 7:30 national, the CBS national game, or the ABC national game, excuse me.
Yeah, the ABC game, but I think I'm going to be tuning in for that one.
It would be number 3 versus number 6.
See, I'm telling you, this is what it's about right here.
Or, sorry, number 4 versus number 6. Michigan is 4th. Ohio State is 3rd, I believe.
So that's going to be a good one, man.
Fun fact, Michigan on the 15th in the Big House. Beaver Stadium hosts the Whiteout, and Ohio State on the 29th.
Oh, hashtag spooky season in the Big Ten.
And the 2 biggest games of our season happen to fall within 21 days of each other. I almost wore my Penn State shirt tonight, too.
I mean, for something like that, I would definitely take it. Get your lead up, build your momentum, and then bam, right smack dab in the middle so you know what's what.
Yeah, I think it's good to have both of these games relatively early in the season, so that way you don't have that opportunity for the injuries and stuff to pile up like you would see towards a later game, like closer to like a Thanksgiving or what have you.
Right.
All right, so that's the college football. Pour one out for the homers. Let's go to the National Football League. Pour one out for the homers. And, well, Eric, we have good news and we have bad news. The good news is that the Jacksonville Jaguars started out with a 14-0 lead on the only undefeated remaining team up to that point in the Philadelphia Eagles. There was a pick 6 off of the hands of Jalen Hurts, and then there was a touchdown from, I believe Robinson scored, or was it Etienne?
It was Robinson.
I was going to say, I thought it was James Robinson. And you guys were up 14-0. Unfortunately, the next 29 points were scored by the Philadelphia Eagles.
What is it with us in these NFC East teams? We had the lead against Washington. Shat the bed. We had the lead against Philadelphia. Royally shat the bed to the tune of 5 turnovers from Trevor Lawrence. And I was saying to myself, it's just a bit of rain. We're from Florida. This should be nothing to us.
If I am not mistaken, I believe Lawrence leads the league this season in fumbles lost.
I thought it was Matt Ryan.
Is it? Well, that's because Ryan had the extra game last night.
Well, even before that extra game.
I thought Ryan led the league in interceptions.
No, Fumbles lost, not
Okay.
interceptions, surprisingly enough.
Okay, so then Lawrence is like second in the league in fumbles lost this year.
Yeah.
For and and I'll say the same thing about Buffalo that I'll say about Jacksonville. There is both of us have a turnover problem.
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo's kind of reared its ugly head against Baltimore, and we'll talk about that here in a few seconds. What can be done? Like if let's say you're Doug Peterson, what are you doing to institutionalize change in order to help protect the football? One of the things that I seem to remember, and I don't know if this would work with NFL players, but I seem to remember this from high school when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Our high school football coach had a rule that if you fumbled in the game on Friday, you had to carry a football with you all day in class on Monday.
I mean, something like that would be very, very similar. Or this is a little bit of an obscure movie, but you remember the movie Second String?
I do not.
Okay.
Not a movie person.
Okay. It was a movie about your Buffalo Bills, mass food poisoning thing, and you get a guy who is a journeyman quarterback, is like third and fourth string guys to go ahead and make a playoff run. In that particular movie, one of the receivers, similar issue. No, it was one of the running backs. He had to carry a football around with him. And this was for like throughout practice 1 week. If anybody was able to swat it and get it out of his hand, that was $20.
Aw, son of a bitch.
And if you went ahead and if you dropped the pass, that counted the same, $20. I think something like that with that little bit of an element, no high stakes, but it's like, all right, especially for Trevor in particular, because he was the source of like those fumbles. Carry the ball, or if you're not getting rid of it by the whistle, that's a little bit right there. Keep those habits going. I think the weather was a bit of a factor, oddly enough, because it didn't rain a whole lot when he was at Clemson. So I get it. But that's something to keep in mind, really, if it continues. I'll chalk the rain off for this one, but something for Doug Peterson to think about, ball security from his quarterback.
Jacksonville plays Tennessee this week, I think.
Nope, we host Houston.
Oh, so it's the other divisional rival. Oh, we talked about this game when we did your game by game, and you said that if they can't beat Houston, then there should be problems. Houston is the only non-victorious team left on the NFL schedule here in a season of what has been relatively almost complete parity.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectations for Sunday?
Win. I'm going to be honest. Even if it's close, I won't be as disappointed. I would prefer a thorough, dominant victory to kind of shake things off, and especially get to 3-2, maintain, because Indianapolis temporarily, with their win at 2-1, has the division lead. Get to 3-2, reclaim the division lead, work from there. If it's scary in the fourth quarter, I'm not going to be happy. And if we wind up losing, as crazy things can happen, I'm not going to be a good person to deal with the following week. You all have been forewarned.
So what you're telling me is your expectations for the Houston game is Al Davis.
Just win, baby.
There you go. All right, let's pour one out for the homers for me, Eric. Go ahead.
So, you had an interesting couple of weeks. A nail-biting win, and then Baltimore happened. Oh, did Baltimore happen? I mean, I'm trying to figure out necessarily what's wrong, because from my perspective, it seems like with a lot of times you're close, but that last cylinder that you were firing on not just early in this season, but all throughout last season.
Oh, go ahead. I'm just saying two words. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah, that last cylinder isn't firing right away. And what's going on? What do you see from this?
2 words. Brian Daboll. Daboll got a reputation as a quarterback whisperer in Buffalo because he was the man that was single-handedly responsible over the course of the last 4 seasons from turning Josh Allen from a first-round pick with potential to a perennial Pro Bowl quarterback.
Now, you do have to give some credit to Ken Dorsey as quarterback's coach, now offensive coordinator.
I think that there was a level of comfort with Daboll that he doesn't have with Dorsey yet as his offensive coordinator.
That makes sense.
And I would argue that the play calling has suffered in Daboll's absence as well. Now, granted, a lot of what happened against Baltimore is stuff that shouldn't happen regardless. Did you know, Squidbit, going back to last season, the Buffalo Bills had scored touchdowns on their first drive in 8 straight games, an NFL record. Allen threw an interception. Allen threw an interception on the first drive of the game against Baltimore. Underthrew, I want to say Isaiah McKenzie, and got it picked off. On our second drive, Buffalo scored a touchdown. On the third drive, Devin Singletary fumbled. So we talked about turnovers for Jacksonville being a problem, and I mentioned that we'll talk about that again a little bit here. It was a problem for Buffalo in the first half as well. That being said, I think all the credit for this victory goes to Leslie Frazier. And specifically Leslie Frazier at halftime, along with, in a sense, Sean McDermott as well. You could argue that McDermott is the great halftime motivator when you think about it defensively for this season here.
Absolutely.
Through 4 games into the NFL season, with which the Bills are 3-1 now, wins over Tennessee, Baltimore, and the Rams, the loss to Miami. But in those 4 games thus far, Buffalo has allowed 7 points in the second half. The touchdown to Miami in the 21-19 loss.
Right.
Baltimore, Tennessee, and the Rams did not score in the second half in our 3 victories. That's not something that we can maintain all season. It's just unrealistic to expect that. That being said, though, if the defense is able to keep clicking, and I have no reason to believe that they won't, we'll talk about that in a second, this week at least. If the defense is able to keep clicking and play at the caliber that this defense is capable of playing of, and if we can correct the turnover problems that have plagued us for a good portion of this season, then I have no reason to believe that the Bills are not looking like anything other than the Super Bowl candidates that a lot of people believe them to be going into the season.
And you mentioned this week in particular, you're going up against Pittsburgh. Kenny Two Gloves Pickett, his first start
in Buffalo against one of the best ranked defenses in the NFL. This is smart. See, you have a quarterback that actually knows Sean McDermott on your roster. Literally, Mitchell Trubisky was Buffalo's backup last year. And you're going with the rookie against the Buffalo defense. Okay, so I will say this much. The Bills have been injury-plagued in the secondary this year, and it continues. Jordan Poyer and Dawson Knox rolled out for Sunday. Knox is disappointing, but Knox hasn't really been a huge factor this year thus far. So while unfortunate, and I wish Dawson a speedy recovery, it'll be good to have Dawson for when we play Kansas City next week.
Oh, yeah. Definitely going to need him against the Chiefs.
Jordan Poyer is the one that concerns me because our secondary has taken injury after injury after injury this season. Dane Jackson with a neck injury against Tennessee in the Monday Night Football game. Tre'Davious White still hasn't returned from his torn ACL last season. Poyer's out. Micah Hyde was hurt, but I believe Hyde is healthy again now. We haven't fielded our starting secondary all season and probably won't until week 7 or 8. We might get Tre'Davious back at the end of October. Odds are looking like it's going to be more like mid to late November based on the word I've heard about his recovery. So the issue that I see is Pickett is starting against a depleted secondary, but he's starting against one of the best defensive lines in football. And what has apparently become a very motivated this season, Von Miller.
I mean, as they say in cricket with wickets, 1 becomes 2. Wondering in this, even though this would be his second, 2, trying to make it 3.
There's also a motivating factor for these Bills as well. Eric, I take you back to September of 2021, where the AFC East favored and potential Super Bowl candidate Buffalo Bills were at home to open the season. Do you remember who they played in week 1 of last year?
Pittsburgh.
23-16 Steelers. Final in the Ralph. You know, we had a revenge game earlier this season against Tennessee. And I believe the quote that I used there was, "We beat the fucking brakes off of them." You're starting a rookie quarterback. Revenge, thy name is Buffalo.
I can't argue against you. I just can't.
I do have a question for you, Mr. Southerner. Are you serious? So I have a tie, apparently.
Yes, you do.
Technically speaking, we both have ties. Eric's is straight up because he picked Houston in that game against Indianapolis, or he picked Indianapolis to cover in that game against Houston. No, you did pick Houston. You had Houston +3.
No, that was Indianapolis -7.
So then what the hell did you get? The straight up was because the game ended in a tie. You took a loss against the spread there.
Correct.
Okay. I had Buffalo -3 against Baltimore last week. Yeah, about that. Bills 23-20 on a walk-off field goal from Tyler Bass.
You know, that game actually made me mad. See, here's the rub. Oh, go ahead.
I assume it fornicated you fantasy-wise.
Oh, no, it wasn't fantasy-wise.
Was it FanDuel-wise?
Bovada, technically.
Bovada.lv, please obey all local, state, and federal gambling laws. 21 means 21. God damn it!
And needless to say, that's exactly what I screamed in the Buffalo game. Now, when you're me, you'll learn the hard way. Never wake up early-ish on a Sunday morning when you're at 5 hours of sleep. You've got very little to do, especially during the Vikings-Saints game. I'm going to go on and place a couple of bets. One of them was a 5-team parlay. And yes, as Brian mentioned, if you or anyone else you know have a gambling problem, please seek help. The number is scrolling across the bottom of the screen.
And if you are listening auditorially, 1-800-522-4700.
So, one of those was a parlay, which Tennessee was one of 2 teams that wound up messing that up. So I'm like, all right, it was a 5-team parlay. I mainly went favorites. It was going to be a good chunk of change. I'm actually going back in and pulling up the specifics of that bet.
Are you pulling up the bet receipt?
Yep.
Okay.
There it goes. So that one, Steelers -3, Cardinals +1, Seahawks +4, Colts -3, Patriots +10.5. Thank you, Titans and Jets, for making that one miserable. But I was like, all right, I can shake that off. It's no big deal. So I put in another parlay because I was looking around, ESPN in particular, and I'm like, oh, this is a pretty safe bet. Buffalo -3.5. Josh Allen over 1.5 touchdown passes.
Yeah, not so much.
That last drive. Only hockey has ever made me throw things, which you've seen. I came that close. I was screaming at my television. All right, Bills have it. All I need, a Josh Allen touchdown pass. Yeah, that hits. It covers. My parlay's good. Then I see what they were doing. I was like, wait, what? Wait, no. Wait, no. No. And then you settled for the field goal and you won.
Did you go full Michael Scott in The Office?
I came close. I came very close.
No, please, God, no!
I was about a couple of no's off, but it was that kind of vibe.
Well, hopefully this week goes better.
Well, I mean, given my track record for Are You Serious?
I believe over the course of the last 2 weeks, you have officially returned to the mean in terms of your Are You Serious predictions.
Yeah, which that still ain't good. I'm sitting 7-12-1, 5-15 against the spread.
Damn it. 7-12-1 for 37.5% straight up. 5-15 is 25% ATS.
Uh-huh.
I am 9-11 against the spread, I believe.
9-10-1.
475. What am I straight up?
11-9.
550. So, I mean, not great compared to some of my previous years, but over 500 straight up, so I'll take that. And close to 500 against the spread.
Yeah, not great, sure, but do you have 2 offers on your record? No, you do not.
I don't have a single loafer on my record, I believe.
Didn't want to throw that part in there, but so be it.
Yep, here we are. All right, so let's get to it for this week here in Are You Serious? And I mentioned that we would talk about them again a little bit later. Troubling times in Norman, indeed. However, this is their rivalry game. This is the Red River. And would it surprise you to know that Texas is a 7.5-point favorite despite the two teams having the same record?
Considering the way Texas played and they're on their backup quarterback, not entirely.
I think that the Alabama game is kind of painting Texas in a different light to people with the fact that if Shane Ewers, EWERS, hadn't gotten hurt and knocked out of that game, a lot of people feel that Texas would have taken down Alabama.
Oh, yeah, that and, let's face it, a couple of shady calls from the refs.
I don't think Texas is that good.
Okay.
I will say that they should have beaten Alabama, 100%. That game was sketch, but in fairness, when Nick Saban is involved, it traditionally is.
Well, when Nick Saban's involved, traditionally it's a cupcake. But that's beside the point.
It was actually the Texas University of the Deaf and Blind in the Longhorn uniforms. Shout out to Jason Teasley. Fun fact: Jason's actually going to the Florida game tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
He's there for homecoming. I told him 2X would fit, 3X for comfort. But anyways, yeah, I don't like Texas as a 7.5 point favorite in a rivalry game against Oklahoma. I think that Oklahoma realizes that as far as the Big 12 goes this year, they're probably screwed, having lost to both TCU and K-State already, who are the probable favorites for the Big 12 title at this point. TCU 17 in the country right now. K-State is up in the top 20 as well. So I think that Boomer realizes that this is going to probably be their last marquee game of the season, given the quality of opposition they face the rest of the way. Give me Oklahoma plus 7.5 as my underdog against Texas in Red River.
Okay. Well, I've got to preface my underdog by saying, with sincere apologies to both Steve Harveys,
as well as Ryan McGee.
And Ryan McGee in particular, you've really been on it this season with the bottom 10. But I've really got to go back to my roots. And when it comes to my roots for Are You Serious, and especially going back to the kickoff, we love ourselves some good action.
I believe the old song would go, it's time for some action.
Times aren't so good in the Midwest. You've got 4 2-2 teams in that conference, and everybody else is 1-3. So 3 2-2 teams.
2 and 3, everybody else is 1 and 4.
Oh, jeebus.
Week 6, sir.
Oh, boy. Well, hey, come on now. I know some of them have gone up against the fighting buys of Open Date U, but that's not important. Now,
Not a one.
If that was a favorable spread, but that actually makes things even worse. But that makes my pick even better. When you have a whole conference like this, and when you've got 2 in-state teams, you know you're in for a fairly even, relatively good game because, well, parity, be it good or bad, is still parity. So that said, as a rule that I have been told I have to abide by as part of Point of Viewer, I'm going to go ahead and zip it up. Give me Akron plus 10.5 against the Ohio Bobcats.
Where is Ohio University located?
I
feel like I should know this, and I don't.
Really? I thought you really.
Oh, that ship sailed with the Antonio Brown conversation. No, actually, University of Dayton is in Dayton. And they're in FCS school. My caseworker went there, actually.
Athens, Ohio.
Where the fuck is Athens, Ohio? I think it's by Columbus. Which would make sense, state capital.
There's Athens County. So it looks like it's right in Athens County, which is... Wait, which border is that? Because I'm looking here. So right on the southern...
Ohio, Kentucky?
Ohio, West Virginia?
That explains its reputation as a party school.
Yep, Ohio, West Virginia border.
Okay, so in the interest of full family show, Ohio was actually once voted the #1 party university by Playboy magazine.
Was it voted around the time to where I would have gone to school?
I'd have to look that up to give you an exact year. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay.
Either head. Anywho.
I was waiting for somebody else to chime in. I'm sure they will.
I'm sure they will too. Let's go to our NFL underdog here. And So we talk about teams in close proximities, division rivals, and such, as is the case with Akron and Ohio University. I'm taking that to the next level with my Are You Serious pick. I'm going to the national. That ship sailed on the Antonio Brown conversation. I'm taking it to the next level. I have to put my hand in camera view. And going to the National Football League with a division rivalry. And a surprisingly efficient 2-2 Chicago Bears team taking on a tumultuous 3-1 Minnesota Vikings.
Again, time zones. All I'm saying. I keep saying that, but it doesn't make it true. I mean, he's got a bit of a point.
It's a 1 p.m. start, so that admittedly worries me a bit. But in fairness, last week, 9 a.m. Kirk Cousins came to play. Granted, it was 1 p.m. over in London, but still, my point being, it was 9 a.m. on the East Coast, so that doesn't count. Give me the Chicago Bears plus 7.5, which seems to be a recurring theme for me this week, as they take on the Minnesota Vikings.
Something standards and practices, something blue names, something water. I mean, again, so far we've been okay with standards and practices as far as I know.
Eric, I'm getting word that today's episode is sponsored by Blue Chew. Something standards and practices.
I mean, if those at the Blue Chew would go ahead. Always a need to make it work.
If ever an appropriate shy rod on this podcast.
And of course, send all sponsorship inquiries to podcast@AmericanWhammy.com. But anyways, as I was saying originally, Brian said, recuerda, no tenemos un SAP button for this sumbitch.
Don't make me draw on a piece of paper again, because I will. All right, go ahead, Eric. Who's your NFL underdog?
I'm also going with teams playing in neighboring states. I'm also going with a division rivalry. And I'm also keeping a very similar spread. I know you usually don't bet against the GOAT. You don't. I get that. However, times aren't all rosy in Tampa Bay. And that's just on the field. Even though this is Atlanta, and this could very easily bite me, I get that. I don't know if Tampa really has enough right now to really cover such a big of a number, especially with Marcus Mariota doing some things. And if Kyle Pitts finds his way into gear, then really look out. But the very least for this week, I am going to tug on Superman's cape. I am going to piss in the wind. I am going to pull the mask off the old Lone Ranger. And I am going to mess around with Slim. Give me Atlanta plus 10 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Join us next week for Are You Serious as we play the fuck around and find out scale. All right. So we paid tribute to the bottom 10 earlier. So let's go ahead and pay tribute to it again. As I'm a little disappointed that you did not mention that your pick for Ohio versus Akron was a candidate for Pillow Fight of the Week of the Century.
Well, Pillow Fight of the Week of the Century.
Of the year, excuse me.
Yeah,
Pillow Fight of the Week of the year.
Yeah, I think this would be what Pillow Fight of the Week of the Year Part 4 for 2022, because we had a doubleheader recently.
Well, Colorado doesn't play Colorado State this year, so there will be no Pillow Fight of the Week of the year of the century this season.
I don't know. I mean, the way that both of those schools are playing, I think Ryan is right. They may have to go ahead and hastily arrange one. So that way fans at Empower Field can suffer even more. But I digress.
I'm getting word. Fuck them. All right. Back to it. So perennially, I can't English.
Perennially.
Thank you. Gesundheit. Ranked in the bottom 10, UMass. To us normal folks, that would be the University of Massachusetts, UMass. They're getting a lot against Liberty. They're getting 24 against Liberty. They're not getting enough against Liberty.
I mean, to be fair, UMass, they're off to a good start by making this game their Pride Day. So I kind of salute them for that.
It is a Baptist Christian university coming to UMass to play this game. And the Minutemen have decided that this week is Pride Week on campus. If that is not high quality troll, I don't know what is. And frankly, I'm here for it.
Same.
That being said, they are making Pride Week and taking on a team called the Flames. Flames on. Note the S. Note the S. Note the S. Flames on. Give me Liberty minus 24. We have gone off the rails.
As if we had rails to begin with.
This is what happens when we record Punch Drunk on a Friday night. All right. My NFL pick for my under. I said Flames on. You can't be mad at that. That's the school's name, man.
He's right. The Liberty Flames.
My NFL pick for the week for the, as Kevin Hart would call them, the overdogs. So New Orleans was the victim of some bad luck on Sunday.
Yeah, a 61-yard double doink.
No, the 61-yarder was good. The 60-yarder double doinked.
I thought that one was 61.
Mm-mm.
Huh, okay. What now?
We moved on.
You guys are so off the rails.
How off the rails are we?
Where you're going, they can't eat. You went so far off the rails that where you went, they can't even rebuild rails to you.
We'll be all right. We're on the last segment. We'll be okay. As I was saying.
Besides, standards and practices does have to occasionally come in and trouble.
Okay,
That's fair.
Back to what I was saying there. Yeah. A little bit of
Because you haven't talked about my picks at all. The producer has picks. Talk about the producer's picks.
You actually made picks?
I had picks.
The producer
last
doesn't
week.
have.
I haven't got them in yet for this week.
The producer doesn't have picks for our on-air segments. He has picks for our year-long contest, which we talk about once we get back to it and closer towards the end. We do need to update everybody on
because the producer is kicking both of your asses right now.
In fairness,
I wouldn't necessarily say kicking both of our asses.
I'm definitely getting my ass kicked, but that's neither here nor there. A little bit of bad luck last week for the Saints.
You want to go, Watkins? You want to go?
Oh hell yeah! I'll give you 4 seconds.
Buddy.
I'd like to go off air with this episode here shortly if we can.
Congratulations, Harry Broadhurst. You've been hijacked. It's now sports in black and white and white.
So wait a minute. Are we some sort of like a?
It's a mix. It's a reverse Oreo. Yes.
Yeah, it's an Oreo. Okay. But yeah, for your overdogs, as you mentioned,
as Kevin Hart would call them. Which, by the way, those what is it? DraftKings, I think the ones that Kevin Hart is doing. Those commercials have been fantastic this year.
they really have.
But give me New Orleans -5 against Seattle because, frankly, as you said earlier, Geno Smith is being a competent quarterback this year, and well, that's not going to last.
I mean, time for the Red Rifle to, actually go ahead and
Where the
fire.
hell was this when he was in New York?
IKNM Poly. 6 syllables.
Now,
What are
for
3 men that
mine,
have never been in my kitchen? Or sorry, what are 6 syllables that have never been in my kitchen?
Special guest appearance by Jonathan Nielsen, apparently.
oh no, don't get that started because then next thing you'll show up when we do our all sports show and talk about the Yankees. That'll really happen. But I digress.
All right, who are your overdogs for this week, Eric?
I've got the one other side of the coin in the Big Ten. A have versus a wanna have that's still something of a have not. Michigan's got the number. They're going to be aiming to keep it, especially knowing what's around the corner for the rest of the season.
What's around the corner? What's around the corner for next week? The aforementioned Penn State game.
Exactly. I don't think they're going to be looking ahead, especially trying to defend their Big Ten crown. And as much as I like and respect Indiana, this is at entirely the wrong time. Give me the Wolverines -22.5.
Fun fact, that's actually the home for Big Noon Saturday on tomorrow. They're at the Big House.
Have fun hyping and keeping that crowd hyped up for what should be a dog game. For the NFL, the previous segment of Standards of Practice is crashing the show. Again, sponsored by Rick's TNT LLC. Commercial coming soon. And don't forget, tax season is right around the corner. Come to Rick's for all your tax needs, especially at the federal level.
Is there a C in that? Is there a C in that?
Yeah. Rick's or R-I-C-K, it's apostrophe S. But yes.
Your name doesn't have a... Never mind. Moving forward.
We mentioned going across the pond. We mentioned Tottenham Stadium. I said that there were caveats to what the Giants would need to go ahead and pull this game out. I don't necessarily think those caveats really happen. Again, someone who's on a mission themselves is going to go ahead and dominate. Give me Green Bay -8 against the G-Men. I don't see it. I want to, but I don't.
I honestly think it depends on Barkley. If Barkley can help the Giants control the clock, if Barkley has a huge game, then I think that the Giants can keep this close and possibly pull an upset at the end of the game here. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I picked Green Bay to win this game. But I think the Giants play them better than maybe a lot of people had anticipated this game being at the start of the season, not knowing what we were getting from Saquon this season. Barkley has... I would argue that Barkley has single-handedly changed the tone of the Giants' offense this year.
You're absolutely right in that regard.
All right. And that's officially going to wrap us up for this week there. You have your Are You Serious predictions? Liberty, New Orleans, Oklahoma, and Chicago for me.
And for me, Michigan, Akron, Green Bay, and Atlanta.
So you can follow along with your predictions as well. By all means, feel free to let us know in the YouTube comment section which upsets you might be expecting, Which overdogs you think are going to decimate their opponents? Bonus overdog, Buffalo minus 14 against Pittsburgh. It's the largest spread the Steelers have faced in more than 2 decades.
Wow.
Vegas has no faith in Pickett starting against Buffalo's defense.
Oh, good
And
luck,
the-
Two Globes.
And the good news for me is I actually get to watch it. The local CBS affiliate is airing the Buffalo-Pittsburgh game over the Los Angeles-Cleveland game.
Nice.
And there's a reason for that, too, that I didn't know if you knew about. So, fun NFL fact for you guys, and we'll get out of here. Did you know that in a split market town, if one team is at home and one team is on the road, they have
show
to
the
air.
road team.
They literally have to. It's in their contract that they have to air the team on the road. Pittsburgh is at Buffalo. Cleveland plays the Chargers at home.
Yep, because again, you have to show the team on the road because for the team at home, you could go ahead.
It drives
and go
ticket
to the
sales.
stadium. Mm-hmm.
That being said, Youngstown has Time Warner Cable, Spectrum now. Spectrum has the local Youngstown CBS affiliate, WKBN. We also get WOIO, the Cleveland CBS affiliate, which is airing the Browns and Chargers game.
So basically, you get the best of both worlds.
In this particular instance, local fans could choose which game they want to watch. For me, obviously, that answers the Buffalo Bills. That is going to wrap it up for us for the football half of tonight's doubleheader here for Standards and Practices, a.k.a. Brian Espinoza, and the HNIC.
NFL is so heavily regulated by the FCC, it isn't even fun anymore. And apparently these restrictions have indeed expanded to contractual obligations because cable platforms won't carry game streaming only. Expect that to change in the near future.
We actually talked about that 2 weeks ago when the Steelers and Browns game was on, because I was under the assumption that that game would air on the local CBS affiliates. It did not.
Nope. Prime exclusive. Again, they paid $1 billion for that schedule.
And it appears their schedule stepped in shit.
I mean, like I said, Tom Grossi had it best. They paid $1 billion for Rings of Power. They paid $1 billion for the NFL package. How is that working out for them?
That reminds me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Read the comment.
Thankfully, the NFL is allowing it on their own platform, NFL Plus, which is going to cause a shift in how games and broadcast are broadcast for sure. Absolutely.
No, wrong.
Really?
Radio only broadcasts on NFL Plus Live.
You know, I was wondering about that because there was a similar situation back when Yahoo broadcast NFL games. With Yahoo NFL games, you could not be on Wi-Fi whatsoever. You had to be using mobile data. Even if you were at home with a Wi-Fi network, you have to be using mobile data to go ahead and see the broadcast.
We'll talk more about NFL Plus once we go off the air.
Oh,
but
yeah.
For now, for Standards and Practices, Brian Espinoza, for the HNIC of American Whammy Media's podcast group, and the anchorman here on the BWSR, Eric Watkins, I am Harry Broadhurst. You have been listening and or watching the Broadhurst-Watkins Sports Report.
Sports in black and white.
A presentation of the Not a Network podcast company, an affiliate of American Whammy Media. Online on Twitter at Not a Network Pods. Search for us on YouTube by searching for Not a Network podcasts. Or again, like we said earlier, just search for the Broadhurst-Watkins Sports Report. You'll find us there. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, whichever you happen to do. And we'll catch you guys next week as we continue here on BWSR.